Firstly, I would like to thank AICTE and the Government of India for this beautiful initiative. I was an MBA student myself, and I was just telling the director that we seldom had opportunities that I think you as this generation have, and it's initiatives like this which will help us bridge the gap between academia as well as the industry. So I hope you make the best of it, and also want to thank the college. I want to thank the director, Dr. Sambashivan, thank the principal, Dr. Selvalakshmi, and Dr. Natraj, and all others for the warm and hospitable welcome that I've been receiving from the time I landed. And I do hope that you make the best of it, because if you get the most, I guess I'll be the happiest person. They say that the best form of learning is when you teach. So to me, I'm using this as much as an opportunity for me to learn based on the questions and the interactions that we share. Yeah. But I do have a few things I'm going to talk about today. We'll talk about the basics of AI, the history of AI. We'll talk about how that is disrupting the industry and the world at large. We will also talk about some specific examples of telecom. That's also because Subex is a telecom specialized organization in terms of our clientele. But while there is a script, I would encourage you and feel free to ask me any question at any given point. Absolutely happy to respond to those as and when they come. But otherwise, there is a Q&A at the end as well. Yeah. A brief introduction on Subex, the organization that I represent. For most who do not know, Subex is more than a 25-year-old organization. It's actually the second oldest product company in India. You hear about a lot of product companies today. But even before all of that happened, companies like Subex realized the value of products, because products is all about IP, it's about repeatability, it is about being able to solve a problem at scale. And that's the vision with which Subex was formed. We grew over the years organically as well as inorganically. We had done about 8 acquisitions by the year 2007. We are listed in the Indian Stock Exchange. We have customers in more than 100 countries. We have a large number of telcos who are actually our customers. For all of you who are, everyone today is a mobile user, right? But if you actually take a step back, you will realize that telecom is one industry where there is huge amount of data, right? It is actually the highest amount of data generated, even if you compare it with an Amazon or a Flipkart. If one were to look at a telco, it's much, much larger data volumes. And therefore, the context of AI in the telecom industry is very, very relevant and very important. People talk about machine learning now. Honestly, telcos have been using machine learning from the day they launched services. and I will talk about how and why. But that's a bit about Subex, and I thought it's important for you to know who we are and why we are good at what we do. Talking about the world today, there are a lot of disruptions that, in my own perspective, have shaped the world in many ways. You can see them there along with the timelines, right? The internet was the first. Computers, of course, and then came internet way back in 1983. That was the first time people spoke about internet. We started talking about intranet, then we started talking about internet, and so on and so forth. That was basically where we started talking about a much larger connected environment, connected universe. And eventually, while we talk about various technologies, SMS, for example, has transformed the way people communicate. It was never about speaking all the while. We may talk about WhatsApp, we may talk about Telegram, we may talk about the other forms, but none of those disruptions have actually taken away SMS as a technology, if you see. We talk about two-factor authentication. We talk about a lot of those. SMS is here to stay. And in fact, it is one of the largest revenue generators in many ways, right? So whether you are a fintech, you're a bank, you're an e-commerce company, you still leverage SMS. So that's one of the reasons why, though it is not seen, SMS is considered as one of the largest technology disruptions, right? IoT started in 1999, but in reality, it was in 2008 where it actually started to take off. The reason I say 2008 is because that was the first year where the number of connected devices exceeded the number of people on this earth. right? And that is where the explosion happened. Why is IoT important? Because when we talk about a connected world, when we talk about a digital world, you start getting a lot more data, a lot more insights the minute everything is connected. So IoT in a way was transformational because it started making us a much larger connected planet. It started increasing the data sets. There is relevance between data coming in from one part of the industry and another, right? You look at ads today on any portal, that is being largely influenced by what you do. You've seen a few websites elsewhere, but an Amazon or a Flipkart are leveraging that data to decide what to sell to you, right? All that is because it's a connected world and they're trying to figure out. If you look at the advertising industry, for example, you are driving down a lane or let's say a highway. Traditionally you used to see billboards which are standard, which are there. There is a standard ad which is all the while there. In the new age, if you see, you'll see a lot of digital billboards. What you may not realize is that those billboards are able to figure out saying what is the segment of people on the highway at that given point, and they have the ability to influence the ad which is being played at that point, right? So the world has changed, and that is because again there is a connected world and there is data which is being leveraged, though we may not be aware most of the times. That's a different problem for another time. And of course then we talk about AI. I'll talk a bit about the history of AI, but the first time that while AI started actually in 1950s, the takeoff happened in 2004. And the reason I'm again saying 2004 is because that was the year that Watson for the first time played a game of chess and defeated Garry Kasparov, right? And that is when it came to light saying there is machines which are capable of being a lot more intelligent than human beings, right? So in my own view, these are some of the disruptions that have significantly influence the way we think, the way we operate, and the way we are going to start behaving in, or be influenced in the way we are made to think going forward as well. A bit of history here again on AI. Like I said, 1950 was the first time that Alan Turing was conducting various tests on AI. He was one of the first researchers on that. In 1955, he presented a paper in the US, and the first time there was a reference to artificial intelligence. What followed after that was a lot of speculation where the government was questioning, and there were people, one part of the politicians actually challenged and said it is not safe and we should not be sponsoring artificial intelligence, right? Because the expectation was in one generation there will be machines which are capable to think like human beings, and people found it extremely overwhelming and unsettling, right? So there were a lot of investments which happened at that point till there came in a AI winter where the fund stopped and the government was forced to withdraw. Then, like you would know, most of the innovations stem from Japan. It was the Japanese government which then started investing once again and gave a lot of grants to experiment on AI. And while that did go to some extent, there were again questions at some point and they had to stop all the funding. But it was subsequently, like I said, when the likes of IBM and others started investing, that AI was started to be more accepted, because people realized that AI is here to stay. As much as we feel unsettled, we have no option but to embrace it. Most of you may not realize, but you are consuming AI in a way. You ask for a courier, you order something on an Amazon, it gets delivered to you. The time, the route, who delivers is actually influenced by AI. So there are a lot of examples in and around us from an AI standpoint which we may not realize, but the reality is today AI is everywhere, right? But it's about how you harness the power of AI for a specific context and for a specific purpose, and that's what is more important. I thought it's important to talk about AI and ML in terms of what they mean and why are they different, because most of the times you see people say AI ML without realizing that these are actually two different different references, and they have their own interpretation. AI is largely the science of imitating the human behavior, to think like a human, to behave, to logic, to reason like a human being. Machine learning is all about creating models which are based to behave or influence outcome in a certain way based on data sets, along with the ability to learn and self-learn from those data sets, right? It's about how you create models. In short, machine learning is a subset of AI. I think that's an important aspect to bear in mind. And it is important for you to know that when you refer to AI, you are not necessarily referring to ML, or if you are referring to ML, you're not necessarily referring to AI, right? But we tend to use that very loosely, right? So it's important in our head that we know what is the difference between the two and refer to them in the right reference context. One of the key elements from an AI standpoint is what powers AI. It is data. There is no data, there is no AI, right? So it is all about data. And why is this important? Because what data you feed into any specific business problem pretty much influences the outcome. And if you see the way technology and the world has been disrupted, you've seen a lot of talk about data warehouse, big data, in many ways. AI came much after that, right? So there is a reason how some of these technologies have evolved, but it is worth remembering again that when we talk about big data, it is about ability to bring in disparate data sources, structured, unstructured data, and be able to leverage that or make it available for using for different applications, right? But when we talk about AI, it is the ability to leverage data from these big data sources or data lakes, as they call it now as well, and then make meaning out of it, right? And by the way, the whole concept of how do you prepare data, how do you ensure clean data is available, itself is an industry, itself is a domain. And for you as students, it is worth spending time to understand how do companies actually make sure they're using the right data set for getting the business outcomes. Because I could be completely giving it a data which is irrelevant or incomplete, and the AI could be giving me results which are once again not necessarily correct. It is not the fault of the AI, it is fault of the data, right? It's garbage in, garbage out, right? That's what we call about bias. We speak about bias in the context of AI. Why do people not accept AI? And we see this very often in the corporate world as well. There are 10 people, there is a reference, and there is some analysis which is presented based on some AI models, but there is a person in the room who has been doing this for 20 years, challenges the source of the data. The AI is not able to explain the reasoning behind that recommendation, and there is a discomfort, and what happens? You basically drop the recommendation. That's explainability of AI, right? And that is why data becomes extremely important, because it influences the outcomes. And again, there are examples where some of the companies have rolled out a specific AI model and then recalled it within a very short amount of time because it had references which were unethical and unacceptable, right? There were racist remarks. We've read about those articles as well, right? The way Facebook was sending ads, there was racism which was there, and they had to roll back some of those things. The penalties they paid were huge, right? The penalties were huge because the implications of something going wrong because of those recommendations is extremely high, right? So very important from your standpoint to start looking at not just how to build a model, but how do you ensure that you are using the right data set, how you are using the right contextual data in terms of how AI is being leveraged and applied. Now, when we talk about AI, it is also important to realize that AI is not going to solve all problems. And it is also wrong to assume that AI can be applied for everything that we do. I was recently attending a lecture, and there was this reference to one of the innovations which happened in Japan. There was a manufacturing plant, and they were basically packaging. There were machines, obviously, all robots were packaging chips. And there were some packages which were light in weight. So what is the quality control? And what one of the persons did was he just kept a fan on the side, which was designed in such a way that if it was lighter than what it should be, it was blown off the conveyor belt. There was no AI there, it was just common sense. And it is important for us to realize that you don't really need to force AI into everything that you do, but also apply it when it is really relevant. Right? So which are the industries where AI is truly relevant? AI is data hungry, like we spoke about in the past. So any industry where you see there is a large amount of data, you would truly apply AI on that. And the reason is because it is almost impossible for the human mind to process that volumes of data, the variety of data, right? It's very, very hard, and therefore you use technology to be able to solve for those problems, right? I mean, industries could be banks. Industries could be, we talk about micro lending today, you see a huge number of companies in micro lending, including Muthoot Finance, which just went for an IPO. How are they deciding, how do I give a loan or a credit to someone else? There is actually an AI model at the back end saying, based on these demographics, here is a consumer and I may be okay to give him a loan of 5,000 rupees or 50,000 rupees, right? If their bad debt is 1.7%, there is obviously a method to that madness. It just doesn't happen like that, right? Similarly, you look at telecom, like I said, we will talk about a lot of examples, huge amount of data that is being leveraged. Or you talk about e-commerce, we all speak about pricing, we all speak about recommendation engines, almost every industry speaks about it, right? That came in from the e-commerce world. That's essentially because huge amount of data. They know exactly what you browsed, they know the flow in terms of which page to which page you went, how much time did you spend on which product, right? And that is then influencing subsequently what they recommend and sell to you. So again, those are some examples of industries where there is large amounts of data, where human intelligence is not enough, because you also need to respond and act in real time when that is happening, right? People with repeatable tasks. We talk about call centers. Call center jobs are being replaced with chatbots, right? And the reason is because, one, it is very hard to train people. People churn. Everyone likes a job which pays us more, so everyone changes jobs. But there is a method to how that has to happen. Why are IVRs today there rather than a call center? Because it's fairly simple, and the IVRs are constantly improved based on how customers are using it, right? So you will see AI coming in to start influencing where there is a repeatable process and which is people dependent. The reason is also because humans are likely to make mistakes. With AI, yes, it comes with its own sets of constraints, but in reality, it gives you a predictable process, it gives you a predictable outcome. And in all those industries where you see anything which is people dependent, anything which is repeatable, AI is likely to take over. You go back to some of the e-commerce, today there are a lot of startups, by the way, which only focus on automating the back-end packaging of all the orders that you place on an e-commerce portal, right? Machines and robots which work with extremely high level of accuracy. They are able to turn around things much faster than what humans can imagine as well, right? And no pilferage, no damage, everything is clear. They work 24/7. People work 8 hours a shift or in a day, right? So any industry like that, industries which are highly prone to risk. When we talk about finance, we talk about banking, the propensity to fail is very high, right? We talk about defense, we talk about security. Why are companies spending today on defense or security? Because the cost of something going wrong is extremely high. So today when we talk about security, there are companies which are leveraging AI to say that I am constantly monitoring the network even before something is likely to fail or something which is likely to go wrong, I mean, there are companies which look at any form of heuristics to say that there is a cyber attack which is likely to happen, and I will mimic a complete network so that I am basically able to deflect the attack. How is that happening? Right? That's again because of AI, but also because those organizations, the cost of failure is very high, and that is where people start looking at AI to be able to help them to prevent any form of risk exposure. And lastly, it is about businesses with high velocity. Businesses today are changing very fast, right? Very dynamic. There is, let's say, a competition which is rolling out a certain price. Let's take about airlines as an industry. There is a fare which is being promoted by an Emirates, for example, for the Christmas season. Now, British Airways has to also launch something at the same time. They don't have the time to go back and say, okay, they've launched, let's call for a meeting, let's decide, let's do, someone comes back 1 week later. No, the time is gone. Recommendations have to happen then and there. Right? As the booking starts happening, they have to increase the prices so that they are maximizing. The initial few seats will always be cheap. That's all happening in real time. Right? And businesses are expected to operate with that level of accuracy and that level of pace. And that is only possible when you have technology at the back end able to scale to those kind of demands and requirements. Right? For example, I will talk about while we are all today consumers of e-commerce, there are a lot of regulations at the back end which are constantly changing. When you onboard a subscriber or a seller on one of these marketplaces, the government is constantly changing guidelines. They are supposed to do validations and verifications of each of this from anti-money laundering standpoint. AML checks are supposed to be in place. You may not realize that, but at the back end, it is technology which is enabling those validations and compliances which are all happening. Right? So any industry which is prone to high level of change and transformation is forced to look at adopting technology and making the best out of it. So let me talk a bit more about how are businesses leveraging AI today. Right? Dealing with increased level of complexity. There was a phase when analytics was taking off, right? I mean, analytics was an industry by itself, but today you talk about analytics, it is expected to be part and parcel of everything that is offered. Right? You look at your bank account, it will tell you, you have withdrawn so much, you have spent so much. If you put an app on top of it, it will say you spent so much on your groceries this month. This is so much you spent on travel. You are getting analytics on the fly. So analytics is built into everything that is there so that it is not necessarily, let's say, surviving as a separate stream by itself. And that is essentially because people are expecting that as part and parcel of everything that you consume. Number of cases, and those industries tend to leverage AI. Right? We talk about fraud, for example. That's one of the problems that Subex solves. We have no idea how a customer is going to behave, and I can't teach those standard rules all the while. The machine is expected to learn and say, here is a new person and here is a new attempt to try and infiltrate into the system. Right? The second is expected to be proactive. Like I spoke about, there is a product which is offered by one of the competition, or there is a huge number of people coming into a certain city or a state because of a certain occasion. One is for you to say there is a Christmas coming up and therefore I need to have a lot of promotions around that point of time. But you can't really influence every time. The system is supposed to learn that based on the number of people traveling in, the number of in-roamers coming in, I should be able to figure out and automatically say there is a large number of people coming in. Maybe you want to offer this kind of a product. Right? So in those cases, the businesses are expected to be proactive and be provided with insights. That's partly what we have in the third category as well, which is providing actionable insights. Today, when leaders are looking at data, they are not trying to understand, saying, tell me where did you get this data from? They are basically saying, can you come back to me with a recommendation and say, what do I need to be doing as a business leader? I don't want you to present data to me. I want you to present insights. Right? And that is where AI is becoming more and more relevant, where you are able to make recommendations and say, here is a recommendation and here is why I think it is what it is. Yes, you still have a choice of either adopting or not adopting that. Right? But as a business leader, one would expect a lot more insights. And in fact, that's where we keep talking to all our colleagues as well on as a common practice, saying, please be part of the solution, don't be part of the problem. Right? So don't go back with questions, try and come back with potential answers. It's very possible that the answer may be something else, by the way, but at least you are having a much better conversation than leaving it to interpretation. Yeah. The last one on the other side is drive efficiencies and productivity. We briefly spoke about this in the other slide, right? If you look at any boardroom conversation, you can research most of the McKinsey reports, Gartner reports, Analysis Mason, or you even look at some of the public listed companies. You listen to what they are saying as their focus areas. Almost everyone is talking about AI. And why are they talking about AI? Right? I'm reasonably sure you go into your interviews and companies will be talking to you about, tell me what do you know about AI? Right? The reason is because they're all constantly trying to experiment and figure out how can I drive better business outcomes for my shareholders. So what does better outcomes mean? Either I'm able to drive growth, I'm able to drive the top line or revenue, or I'm able to manage better cost. How does cost control come in? By driving efficiencies, by driving optimization. We spoke about the example of how certain industries are replacing humans with bots, like at the back-end packaging part of it. Extremely efficient. Your average return for every rupee spent on a machine is much higher than what you would spend on human beings. Why are we talking about driverless cars today? Right? They can run 24 hours except when they run out of charge. Right? But we are expecting everyone to be productive. It's one extra seat in the car as well. So in every which way you look at it, people are trying to drive efficiencies. Every industry is saying that as against what I used to get, I now need to get 2x if I really need to make this meaningful. Because shareholders are constantly saying, give me more value, show me better results, more profits. And the only way you can drive profitability is through technology adoption. Right? So leaders are today saying, I want to adopt AI where I can bring in a lot more efficiency. And again, these are manufacturing. These are large people-intensive businesses. For example, when OpenAI came in, you have seen that there were a lot of companies which were focused around content management actually shut. Right? There were companies which laid off hundreds of people who were purely working in the marketing and creating content for them for their SEO requirements. Because machines are capable of doing it far better. I don't need to sit there and explain to 10 people saying what I want. I'm sure some of you might be using Grammarly today. Right? Earlier there used to be a role called an editor for every proposal that went out of a company. Now today everyone is supposed to do it as part and parcel of what they write because Grammarly is sitting on your desktop. It influences your emails. It influences your documents. Right? So there are efficiencies which are expected. There are better outcomes which are expected in the way you work and what you deliver. Improve business velocity. Again, we spoke about some of the examples, so I'll not delve much into it. But businesses are moving at a significantly fast pace, and it is almost impossible to call for a meeting to review what to do next. Decisions have to happen on the fly, and businesses are expected to move much faster. Right? So, for example, I'll take the same example of fraud. If there is an exposure of a certain type, I don't want to be going to my manager and say, can I cut the line of this subscriber because he hasn't paid me money. The system is expected to decide saying he is a bad customer, you better cut him out because otherwise your loss is going to be very high. Right? In the telco world, for example, we have what we call as roaming fraud. People take a SIM card, travel out of the country, and before you realize, in 1 hour they could be creating lakh lakhs and lakhs of bills and not pay for it, right? So for the operator at the back end, you're not just not recovering the, let's say, couple of lakhs, but you're also going to pay another carrier because that customer was or subscriber was using another roaming network. So it's actually a double whammy, right? So businesses are expected to move much faster. Velocity is very high, and it's only AI which can come in and start taking some of those decisions, saying this is a new customer, he has come in less than 6 months, he has changed his phone, he's traveled back, and he's suddenly spiking the number of calls. Very abnormal. Go and immediately deduct, or cut the line, or direct him to the call center, right? I'll give you another example of KYC. We all talk about KYC. Today companies are leveraging KYC to figure out how do I influence how my customers are being onboarded, right? We spoke about microfinance. There is a workflow at the back end. You do a KYC. If the system feels that you are a good, legitimate consumer, it automatically approves your loan, right? If you use credit, it will tell you based on all your history, great customer, here is 1 lakh rupees loan, your eligibility. But there are also cases where you may request a loan and they will say that this sounds a little suspicious. Your loan is approved, but please go to one of our closest branches so that we can get you sign up. Actually, it is influencing the workflow based on your credit history and your credit rating. That is being done by a machine. Workflows are defined and automatically updated based on the subscriber behavior and that scenario, right? So this is all again AI happening at the back end. That's why I said we may not realize, but AI is pretty much influencing everything that we do. Transform customer engagement. Today, most of the times we do not realize again, but you call a call center, they know exactly the number of transactions you have done. They know everything about the customer. We keep talking about customer 360, right? Almost always we know how some of these things are coming together, and those are popping up on the agent's screen saying this is all the history about the customer, and this is why we want to be able to help the customer to have an intelligent conversation. It is not actually the intelligence of the agent alone, but there is something at the back end which is influencing that customer experience or that customer engagement, right? So AI is again giving a lot of these intelligence insights, and companies are trying to differentiate in the way they engage with their customers. We all have friends and family, right? I'll give a lot of examples of telecom so that it's easy to relate as well. We have this friends and family pack. So I have my wife and my children on that pack. Now I go and apply for a roaming into another country. The agent immediately knows that this is Shankar, he's going out, he has a family pack, there are 2 others on that plan, and promptly asks saying, sir, is it a personal trip? Should I also enable roaming on your family numbers? That is customer service, and obviously you feel delighted, right? Hey, someone's asking me smart, intelligent questions. That's because that the context of what is there is actually being presented to that agent there to be able to interact and provide value. And that is what is customer experience being influenced significantly. Obviously, when we talk about AI, there is large number of risks as well. When the returns are high, the risks are much higher. And it is important for us to be aware of what are the risks in these kind of scenarios, and how do you ensure that you are at least cognizant and prepared to deal with what is likely to happen. Abuse of application. In fact, we were just discussing this morning, Subex is one of the pioneers when it comes to telecom fraud prevention. Right? And what we increasingly realize is that as much as the telecom providers are mature when it comes to dealing with fraud, the fraudsters are actually 10 times more efficient than the telcos itself. Right? They make a living out of it. You all know Simbox fraud. Does anyone know? Simbox fraud is essentially where you have a machine where there are a lot of SIM cards, and those are being used to either make robocalls or terminate international calls, and where the revenue for that doesn't go to the operator, it goes to that connection. Basically, this is a way of trying to create a large amount of revenue, and then they take that money and go away. But the cost of a SIM box today is about $5,000 if you have to do that setup. And the ROI for that 5,000 is less than 5 minutes. The minute they switch it on, in 5 minutes he has his money back. So as a telecom provider, you need to be constantly trying to figure out how do I actually find that person in less than 5 minutes and cut him off, right? And sometimes, by the way, you may even want to let it happen because you want to go and catch that fellow as it happens, right? But again, that's a different science. But the point I'm making here is there is a lot of abuse of those applications which happens as well leveraging AI, and it is important for us to make sure that we are not using it for the wrong purposes, right? But be aware that there are people who are attempting to do it, right? We talk about social manipulation. We see a lot of deep fakes. Recently, a lot of the actors have been in the news for deep fakes. That's a wrong use of technology, right? Before elections, you see a lot of videos coming in from different political parties, each trying to influence the other, which is again data represented in different ways to influence certain outcomes, right? So just be cognizant that there are applications like this as well, and if you are expected to forward something, please think twice before you forward, right? The second is AI is not a cure for all. We spoke about the example of the packaging, right? Don't try to force fit AI into everything that you do, right? There are simpler solutions to complex problems. So one of the things that we as business leaders are always trying to do is always take the a conscious step saying, how do I find simpler solutions and not throw people at a problem or not try to overcomplicate everything that we do, right? Because if I have to make a decision on a certain instance, I can't be waiting for 20 days for something to happen. By then it is too late. Something has to happen now, right? So find simpler solutions, explore all other alternatives before you are very sure AI is actually the solution. So if someone says that, tell me how can AI solve the problem, you don't need to necessarily say AI can solve the problem. Think twice. Maybe it's a trick question in your interview, by the way. Bias. We spoke about this briefly when we spoke about data. What data you feed into the problem actually tells us what is the outcome, right? For example, I could be, when we talk about advertising as an industry, I may give in a lot of information about, let's say, gender, age, will give me one output in terms of saying what ad would be relevant there. But the minute I say this is on so and so, if I take Bangalore where we have the outer ring road, it's all IT population. But if I feed the context of saying this is on outer ring road where most of them are IT population, my recommendation would be very different. Right? If I gave further input saying each of these people 80% of the time are the same set of people and he travels every day of the week, the recommendation would be very different. He travels only on 3 days of a week, the recommendation will be different. You see how every data input is actually acting as an insight where the outcome is coming differently.
But here can I use
yes,
AI to create data and use the data to run the way I want?
So today, so the question is, can I use AI to create data? It does happen today, right? Today when we are doing some form of initial tests and building initial models, test data is created, data labeling is done, but the reality is you still have to validate that with real data. It can be used for some level of initial experiments, but if you look at medical science as an industry, at some point they will need to use some level of real data from true patients, right? So there is no going away, but it is done today to a large extent in every industry, right? But bias is important. But it is important to be aware that you are influencing a certain bias even as you are trying to build an AI model, right? So make sure there is no bias. Most of the times, in fact, there is a question saying, how do I know what data to send into an application as well? Just send all the data. Let the AI model, these days they are very intelligent. They know what data to take from that. They will even tell you, here is the data I've used, here is the data I'm not going to use. But the model may also be intelligent to say that it was not relevant then, but it is important now, 1 year later. Right? So make sure that you are not influencing any bias into whatever you think is the way that I would like to see answers. We are humans after all, right? And the model will be influenced based on what you sent. Compromise privacy, big risk. Most of the times we gather data without realizing that we are compromising privacy. There is, of course, you go to Europe, you will see GDPR. India is now coming up with a new law similar to GDPR. Privacy is extremely important. Where there is data, there is always a risk. And someone will be waiting to get that data because they can manipulate and use that for their own advantage. We talk about security, and in fact one of the things we talk about is whenever we do a basic trial, the reports, every report will tell you that every organization has people who are sniffing onto the network and monitoring what is happening. Most of the times these are good people also, who are just doing it for the kick of doing things, right? They may not have necessarily bad intentions, but there is one bad person, right? So it is very important for us to be aware that when you own data, you own the responsibility of how the data is being managed, how it is being accessed, and how it is being used and for what purpose. Right? So privacy extremely important in an AI context because huge amounts of data and you have no idea how it is going to be used. Right? So important to be aware of that. This is just an illustration of different use cases that you can see just in a telecom context. Right? You talk about different domains, right? You talk about finance. Again, what you see on the left is all the different functions in any organization. The same is the case with the telco, right? You talk about finance, you talk about marketing, you talk about customer care. Those functions exist. And if you look at different forms of applications that are potentially possible, when you talk about pricing, how are pricing decisions made? You look at a telco, you would think there are standard set of products. If you went to an Airtel or a Jio store, their products would have changed 6 months later. Because now they have DTH bundled along with your postpaid, along with internet. And that product is going to change again in 6 months. Right? So how do you constantly keep churning those price plans so that you are making it competitive? Not just from an perspective of trying to get more customers, but to increase your revenue as well as increase your margins. Right? Churn. To acquire a new customer costs 5 times more than the cost of retaining an existing customer. So almost every time, everyone is trying to ensure I don't lose an existing customer. It's true for every industry, by the way. Right? So how do you ensure that this customer is likely to churn? What signals do you see and how do you interpret the data to say that churn is likely to happen and I don't want to wait for the customer to churn and then make a call at that point. But I want to see those signals to say, please reach out to him or her because he is thinking about it. And maybe run some proactive promotions. Right? Sometimes you would have thought about something and then you see an ad about it or you receive a call from a call center. And you might be wondering why. Because someone is listening to you. Right? We talk about sales. Again, which product to sell when. We talk about backend operations. How do I decide what inventory is to be stored where? Again, you look at the telco, there is a lot of infrastructure which is there across the city, right? I mean, there are towers, there are cell sites, there are base stations, there are antennas. How do they plan to ensure that if something is going wrong, I have enough spares available so that my network is still active? Right? There is a lot of technology at the back end which is looking at the quality of the asset, the life of that asset. When was the last time it was serviced? What are the parameters based on which I can see that the quality of network is failing? I need to therefore maintain certain level of spares so that even if that comes down, I am able to manage it. Maybe easier in a city because you know how the city is distributed. But maybe there is, you look at a place like Australia, for example. If you see Australia and if you see all the key cities, they will be in different edges of their country. Yet you drive through the desert in Australia and you will still find network coverage. There is obviously something which is there which is keeping that network on. And how does a telco ensure that I have spares and assets available to ensure that my network is constantly on? Right? One of the things we talk about interesting applications of AI is there is a regular scan of all the assets which happens, which is a mandatory requirement, where the telco is supposed to say that I am going in physically or manually inspecting a site, base station, and saying, okay, these are the number of assets, and I need to make a register and say, okay, all of these assets are still there. Then there is a depreciation of the asset and all of that which happens. This process is manual for years. And also most of the time what happens is they don't have enough people and they end up doing random sampling. Today with technology, what is happening is there are devices or drones which are there which just go in, take images of those base stations, and based on those images they map that onto different asset classes and say that this is an Ericsson XYZ, this is a Nokia asset for 5G, and so on and so forth. Right? Everything is automated, there are no humans. What that is bringing in is my ability to do 100% coverage of the assets. It is AI being applied where I am able to take an image, extract that, map that onto another image and say this is actually so and so vendor and so model type. It is very, very intelligent and very precise. Right? So those are the kind of applications which today we are seeing in a telecom context. And by the way, I am only scratching the surface when I talk about telecom as an industry. Happy to talk more about it, but I could speak the whole day, right? But this is just one industry, and almost every industry you will see this level of applications coming up. Nobody is looking for physical verifications anymore. There are a lot of industries which are asset heavy, right? Compliance we speak about assurance, what kind of records are maintained from a forensic standpoint. So again, today most of these telcos maintain another setup of data which is available to the government agencies for any forensic investigations. Right? So how is that data being maintained? How is that being accessed? What level of data historically am I maintaining? All of those insights and access controls, everything is there and available, which is not visible to the common man, but those are other applications of legal intercept that we see from a telecom standpoint. Right? But this is just to give you a illustration of the different kinds of applications from an AI standpoint. Now, one thing you want to bear in mind between the previous slide and this slide. In the previous slide, we were talking about how leaders are looking at consuming data. Leader is not just a C-level person, but there are leaders who are responsible for each function. There are people who are responsible for significantly important decisions in the business, and you can see how they are leveraging AI for their part of the business. Right? So AI is not just for the top, AI is for everyone. And tomorrow some of you may be doing that. If you are going into, let's say, a corporate investment, or if you are looking at equity markets, you would also be using a lot of AI there to make recommendations based on saying, this is something which is happening externally, there is a war happening between Russia and Ukraine, and what is the influence of that on some other vertical. There are specific startups which focus only on gathering this level of data and making recommendations saying, here is how the markets are likely to kind of get influenced. I hope we are okay on time. Please correct me. Otherwise, I spoke about telco. I spoke about leaders. Right? What is important from your standpoint is when you look at AI as a category or as a space, it is important for you to understand how are these companies segmented. There are companies which are focused around building platforms for AI. Right? They basically talk about zero coding, right? Or enterprise AI, AI for everyone. You're not a developer, you're not a data scientist, yet you need to consume AI. So there are platforms which are being built for those purposes, right? Then there are second industry specific applications. If you look at the legal world, for example, huge amount of documentation. Every case has hundreds of pages. How is one going to interpret that? So you have industry-specific applications which are made available where AI can be applied. And again, there are specific companies which focus around very, very niche specialization. For example, we spoke about data preparation. There is a company which focuses just around the data labeling part of it. Data labeling, as you all know, is you throw in data and AI will automatically say, based on this kind of data, here are all the different tags which are relevant for that, which is then used to make recommendations, right? So there are companies which are building platforms, there are companies which are building specific problem statements. Security could be another, data quality could be another, risk could be another, and industry specific applications. So when you look at companies, it's just important for you to understand how the space is distributed and what are the potential opportunities which may exist going forward. A few examples, I will not talk about everything. Grammarly we have spoken, which helps you to create content automatically using AI, right? There is also a company which is specialized around Soundful, which helps you to create podcasts. It helps you to create audio bites based on AI, right? So you don't have any more of this sound technicians, you don't have any more of this voice experts or voice modulation. You could give in a song which is sung by KK and make it sound like it is sung by Arijit Singh. That is all AI, right? And there are companies which specialize in this. In fact, there is a company or a startup in Australia which does music for ads and for films, and it is all based on AI. There are no real artists. It's valued at billions of dollars, right? So then you have Wiz.ai, you have Atomic.ai. Atomic.ai, for example, creates molecules based on different scenarios, and then that is used for medical research, right? So there are different industries which are leveraging this in very, very different ways. And this slide is specifically for you to think in terms of the kind of disruptions which are happening today, which were not otherwise possible in the past, right? Dataiku is another platform-based company. Terragonia, for example, is a company that specializes in looking at different data points and making recommendations to investment companies, venture capital firms, and saying here is how you can maximize the ROI based on how you're trying to go and invest, right? So it's a diverse set, but gives you a good sense of saying what are the disruptions which are happening there and what kind of possibilities exist. If any of you want to be an entrepreneur, I guess this is an eye-opening slide for you, right? Because it just tells you the possibilities of how you want to go about. Talking a bit about the roles, we spoke about AI at large in the last hour or so. There are various kinds of roles which are being created in the AI world. There are new job descriptions which are going to come up, and quite a few of these will be new, right? So if I were to talk about AI evangelist, it is about someone who's constantly training. A lot of these organizations today do not know about AI, and there is a lot of hesitation to embrace AI, right? And this person's job is purely to go educate, do constant training, enable people on AI and its benefits and how it can be used. Then you have an annotation specialist. We spoke about data labeling, right? There are people, I was recently talking to a company where they are so focused around the banking as well as the retail industry that they have built a mechanism where you just feed in data and their system automatically does the entire labeling for that data, right? And that is how you bake the domain into that. So there are specialists who are expected to do the whole data labeling once the data is being fed into the application, because that's the first step of data preparation, which then influences what happens at the end, right? AI ethics. Someone has got to constantly monitor saying the AI is actually doing the right things and not trying to do something which is stupid or trying to take over the world, as one would say, right? So someone has to constantly monitor that. Someone has to constantly report. By the way, these roles may be reporting to the board or even to the regulator in case you are a listed company eventually, right? So these are some examples. Of course, I'm not talking about the regular roles like data scientist and so on and so forth, but these are new kind of roles that are likely to come up going forward. We keep talking about AI, but the reality is enterprises struggle to embrace AI. That's a reality, right? People position that we are high tech, we are everything, but there are fundamental reasons why embracing AI is still not as easy as it is said. And there are reasons why that is the case, right? We talk about time gap. The time it takes for people to embrace or trust the recommendations of AI, right? There is a hesitation for all the reasons I said. There is someone in the room who has been doing that for 15 years and they want to believe they know it better than AI. Again, I'm not saying the right or wrong, but there is a reason why they are hesitating to do that, right? Value. The value in terms of it is where do I apply AI and how do I translate that into a business context, right? So which means you need to understand the domain and you need to apply it in the right place in the right way and consume the data in the right way, right? So that is the value gap, and of course the skill gap. Honestly, there are not enough people today when it comes to data science and AI as much as the industry would need. We are still at the start of a disruption and there is a lot more talent that will be needed. If you think that you can stay away from AI, the reality is you will not. You will be consumed, you will be consuming, or someone else will consume, right? So there is a gap in terms of skill set which is not there across the industry, and that is a definite issue, which is why you will see no code applications, no code AI, and so low code and so on and so forth. But there are still a significant number of roles that will be created and significant number of opportunities that will come up. So I thought this was important for you as students in terms of what is it that you should be looking for, or what do I look for as an employer when I look at hiring people. I look for people who are having a sensitivity to data awareness, right? So when I hire today, again, for a specific role, I am also trying to evaluate saying, are they aware of what is the context of that data? Don't just go back and say, I can build a better model. Honestly, there are smarter ways to build a better model. But what I want to really understand is that, do you understand the business context of that data? And do you spend time trying to understand the data before you simply get into the engineering side of it? Right? Research mindset. Always keep asking questions. Business is changing. We spoke about moving from the known to the unknown. Unless you are constantly asking yourself those questions, unless you are constantly trying to get more data and make it more intelligent and meaningful, you will never be able to keep constantly getting better by the day. For that you need a curious mindset, right? So don't stop at what is being told. Most of the times you need to look beyond what is being told, right? Which is why you need a research mindset where you're thinking for tomorrow and you're trying to solve beyond what is being told. You need to be business savvy. Stop being an engineer, right? All of you are MBA grads. Think from a business standpoint. Bring the business context. Look at the function. Look at your customer. Look at the impact of everything. If you just be technical, experts, you may really not cut eyes, because someone can bring in a context which is a lot more relevant. So look at the bigger picture in terms of what you do. Systems perspective. I take a decision on a certain price plan being rolled back or a discount being rolled back. It has significant amount of impact on customer experience and the number of calls that are likely to come onto the customer care. There is a branding impact. So it is not just about making a recommendation, but there is a much larger impact on the business for everything that is being told and everything that is being done. So make sure that you are someone who is looking at a broader perspective. So if someone asks you a question about what is the implication of this, you need to be able to think across all functions, the functions that we spoke about on the left side, which is finance, customer care, everything else. Master the domain, spend time understanding the business, because without that, honestly, you're not good. I mean, I'm not even mincing words here. right? So you need to know the domain, you need to know the business and apply that. I would rather hire people who are good on the domain and doing okay on the data science part of it than hire extremely good data scientists with no understanding of the domain. Right? Curiosity, willingness to learn. What you know today is not enough for tomorrow. So you need to be constantly learning, you need to be constantly improving. And when we look at people today, these are some of the softer aspects of what we are trying to evaluate beyond just being a good data scientist. Tomorrow there will be systems which will be able to automate some of the model building. I mean, they're already there, they will only get better at it. So I don't need you to build models alone. I need you to bring in the context. Or I need you to be able to interpret what is being said, challenge it and make it better. And that is the mindset which we will always be looking for when we talk to potential hires. Right? And something that you would want to be aware as you go into the corporate world in the future. Right? That was largely what I wanted to talk about today, but absolutely happy to take any questions, and I hope this was of use.
Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
We students use AI like ChatGPT sometimes to do our assignments, but instead of using AI for shortcuts, how to utilize it efficiently?
See, in fact, there is, if you look at some of the universities in the US, they encourage you to use ChatGPT for assignments, right? Because there is a technology available to do plagiarism checks as well as what is generated by ChatGPT or otherwise. While you may do that, the reality is your faculty is evaluating what more did you add to that beyond what you got from ChatGPT. Right? So if you think you've been smart enough just to use that and provide a report, that is not enough, because that is expected today, which is where we need you to bring in over and above that, what more can you do, right? It's most of the times about what questions you ask. I mean, let's be honest, ChatGPT gives you answer based on the question you ask. Can you be smarter in terms of how you're asking a question? Maybe it will give you better perspectives. I guess that's what you would want to look at, because everyone knows that you are using ChatGPT or one of the other means to create reports. Yeah.
Thank you for letting the faculty members know that you use ChatGPT. Thank you.
Submitted. How much ChatGPT is used, we can know.
Yeah. I mean, there are standard tools available today to. In fact, the whole SEO model, which is done by Google, is able to recognize if your content is generated by one of the bots, and it rates your SEO content lower if it is generated by a bot.
No, these days even research papers are written using
Correct. So you will be evaluated for what more you can do beyond that than just that.
How to develop our skills?
I wish that's an easy answer. I don't think there is a simple answer to that, but start by trying to, like I said, it is most of the times it is about how you want to look at applying that. It's not about the engineering behind it, but it is about the business outcome that you're trying to derive. Focus on the business outcome and the problem that you're trying to solve. You may find better answers if you do that. Right? The technology is easy. Today it will be R, tomorrow it will be something else, OpenAI or something else, right? But just take a step back, focus on the outcome rather than how to learn that part, because what you learn today may be disrupted next year. So that's one of the challenges I think all of you will face as you go out in the world, that the rate at which disruption is happening, before you realize, that would have been dated, and there is a newer way of doing things. Sure.
So due to rise of AI will go down the human cognition skill. What happened to in future, what happened to the human intelligence?
So maybe if the question is, will there be job losses? Absolutely, there will be job losses. Right? Do I expect a person to behave the same way that he was doing in the past? Absolutely not. I expect the person to consume AI and do things better than that. Right? So you need to learn to use AI. You cannot run away from AI. Right? So it doesn't matter whether you are a shop floor engineer or you are someone who's sitting in a boardroom and consuming. You need to learn to consume AI and add value on top of it, because everyone will be forced to accept and use AI.
So this one, as right now, the first-hand experience we have in AI is using ChatGPT and other tools. So as managers, what exactly are the tools which you will be using in real life, like other than ChatGPT, like which is integrated with AI? Will you be using any specific tools for data analysis or any other kind of tasks, or is it embedded in the existing applications?
See, today the reality is that there is so much of open source contribution that technology sets are changing also very, very fast. So, for example, you could be using a certain reporting or analytics layer on the top, and tomorrow that will get replaced with either a superset or something else, right? And that is constantly going to change. And I think your focus should not be on tools as such. It's more about why are you using that and how do you constantly ensure that you are evaluating different options also out there. Because if you go to the open source world, again, for the same problem statement, you'll find 1,000 companies. You should rather master the art of evaluating and figuring out the right technology, even as you learn a few technologies, because that technology will be disrupted tomorrow.
Good morning, sir. So I just have a question on the concept of digital twin. So we spoke about AI, ML and data. So digital twin is like a concept where the input is, like we fetch the data and it gives us simulations. So how much do you think it will benefit any business?
I think we should look at digital twin along with 3D printing together, because those are the technologies together will have a huge disruption. There are certain scenarios where you cannot simulate or you do not want to simulate because either the cost of that experiment is too high, right? And sometimes it may be a human life as well. So definitely huge role to play from a transformation standpoint. But that coupled with 3D printing, the cost of 3D printing, the accessibility, availability of that. We are talking about today using 3D printing in medicine field. We are talking about that in the context of space research as well. So absolutely important, where your cost of experimentation is significantly better, or like I said, sometimes you would not be able to run certain experiments with humans. So very relevant again.
Sir, and do you think like the R&D team of each business will be replaced by this concept?
Not really. Not really. So I think we are far from being at a space where we can let machines still take decisions by themselves. There is a constant fine-tuning, there is a business relevance, context relevance which needs to be brought in, and technology, all said and done, is today not at a point where we can just leave it free form and allow it to make decisions. So it will take a lot more time and comfort before we are seeing that happen, but it is bound to happen in some places. What we expect is research to continue to make things better, research to connect the dots sometimes and even give value. But at some point, yes, there will be always technology which will do better than humans. But I also want to believe the average intelligence of humans are going up. It is expected to go up. I mean, your generation is far smarter than what we were at when we were in college. So that's the truth as well.
Hello, sir. Sir, you spoke about AI, sir. Now AI is our assistant, sir, but over some period of time, if AI become our masters, don't you think like it will it will reduce the power of human brains.
In certain cases, AI is definitely going to be smarter, right? Call center jobs are being replaced. So if someone is just trying to drive a taxi and think they can make a living for the next 20 years, they better be worried, right? Because that part of the world is going to change. What we are expecting is that being the common ground where the rest of the world operates, what more value can you add? So people are expected to be a lot more intelligent, but that will come at a price at some point. But again, you look at AI, a farmer has to still do farming. Right? So there are certain basics which still have to be done by the humans before the machines take over.
Sir, don't you think that like after some years, AI will not take over farming, sir, without humans?
It will influence in a significant way, right? I mean, it will tell you what to do. It will tell you when to go in and sow the seeds. It will tell you when is rain likely to come in, right? It will tell you what machines, which machine to take so that you can actually maximize the amount of, let's say, farming that you are able to do for the same acre of land. Bots can do that as well, but you still need a farmer to own that, no? Unless the machine says, I want to be the farmer and I want the humans to run it. There is no straight answer to that, but yes, machines will be smarter at some point.
Kumar, well, thank you for the presentation. So, you said AI is replacing the back-end jobs like IVRs and bots and all. And there are models which are being developed in the front-end jobs as well, like medical diagnosis and prescription.
Yes.
So, do you think these kind of, the impact which was created for the back-end jobs will be similar for the front-end jobs as well? And will people be able to accept the medical prescription given by AI? Because people can easily trust or maybe consume the things that are coming from ChatGPT as an assignment or something. But when it is something which is actually done on a case-to-case basis, will people trust AI?
It's an interesting question, by the way. I think it's a question which most doctors are dreading, because people are more knowledgeable Google doctors than the doctors themselves. Recently, there was one of the experiments with OpenAI where it actually passed a medical examination within a few days, which otherwise someone would have taken 7 years to complete. Right? So technology will start making it so much more easier for people to get those insights. There are companies which are trying to aggregate all the x-rays of different, let's say, patients. There are companies which are aggregating patient information and then trying to do research on top of it, so that it can at least prompt a recommendation today. But the question is, as a patient, would you rely on that and stop going to a doctor, or will you still go to a doctor and say, this is what it is saying, tell me which, right? You will cross-check and verify, but you will not stop going to a doctor. Because if something is going wrong, then you cannot be suing a bot at the back end. But more importantly, I think, for example, if you want to express or explain a certain pain, there is something that can only happen in person today. At some point, will we see robot doctors? Possibility. I guess it's anyone's guess.
I have a doubt. Does data have life cycle, sir?
Does?
Data have life cycle.
Life cycle. If you look at it in the context of relevance of data, data will always be relevant. But it has a life cycle in the sense that in certain contexts, my data of yesterday is not relevant for me today when I talk about fraud, because it has already happened. Right? But is that data useful for driving a churn as a use case? Yes, I will still be keen to use it. So I guess the life cycle again is to be looked at in the context of the application or the problem you're trying to solve. Right? But data is still relevant. You still need to store records for 12 months because there is a regulatory compliance. So there is a life cycle, but in the context of what you're trying to do. I'm glad there are questions. Someone's been listening.
Sir, companies when creating AI, they know there are negative impacts.
but are they wantonly ignoring it, or they are trying to optimize it to a possible?
Can you repeat that question again?
Companies while creating AI,
Right.
they know there are negative impacts
Sure.
because of that AI.
Sure.
Are they wantonly ignoring it or trying to optimize it to a possible?
See, there are companies which followers and leaders, right? There are companies which are already adopting, experimenting. That's why I said every company, every boardroom is saying that they want to use AI, right? Some will say, I will experiment and I will take a lead. Then there are companies which will say that I will follow after someone else has succeeded at it. Now let's look at the companies which are leading the race. It is not that they will blindly come in and say, okay, here is what the machine says, I'm going to believe what it says. There is a life cycle. So you get the data, you run certain hypotheses, you get certain recommendations, you cross-verify, validate that, you do an A/B test with a smaller sample, only after which you slowly start trying to expand that and make it, let's say, a common way of working. So there is a certain science behind how that is done before it is fully embraced. But it is not that people are staying away. The people who are staying away is basically because they're saying, okay, there is a larger company which is experimenting, let them figure it out. I don't mind being a follower, right? So that's how I would look at it.
Good morning, sir. My name is Arul. Sir, my question is on the defense side of AI, sir. In the recent Israel-Hamas war, sir, the air defense system of Israel, the Iron Dome, powered by AI, was broken out by the Hamas, sir. How can we measure the risk associated with AI, sir?
Sometimes you will be scared of trying to assess the risk, which is why I said sometimes the cost of failure is so high that you would only look at the cost of keeping AI there rather than the cost of something going wrong. Specifically in areas like security. Today, if you see, I think recently there was an article which said that Pakistan is investing hugely on drones to be able to start doing the monitoring or surveillance at the borders. Sorry?
Do they have money to invest in those drones?
Well, it depends. Maybe it's coming from China for all that you know. And hopefully they will last. But yeah. Again, if you look at some of these sensitive areas like security, the cost is. Can you put a price to human life? I don't think you can. So you would not really focus on what is the cost of doing the negative side, but you would simply do it because you don't have an option but to do it.
One more question, sir. Sir, can we mitigate the risk of climate change using AI, sir?
Absolutely. Again, you look at some of the forward-looking countries. We were speaking about Netherlands this morning. You look at some of the other countries, France and others, Sweden. They are doing huge amount of research on how AI can actually change the world, right? In fact, I was at an exhibition which happened recently, and they were talking about how they can use sunlight and raindrops to drive energy. Right. So a lot of innovation happening from that standpoint in some of these countries where it is being used for energy conservation and for climate change problems. It's already being done, so it's not something new, by the way.
Good morning, sir. This is Prakishwari. So my question is, like in a situation like I'm a CEO, so I have to decide that is AI or people. So if I take AI, there will be unemployment. If I take people, the accuracy level or the speed can reduce. So what will be your opinion while selecting AI or people?
I think someone else asked a slightly different question, saying, how do you decide whether AI will take over? Look, I think again that is where the human intelligence and judgment will have to come in. As leaders, we cannot standardize saying I'm going to go blindly with this or I'm going to go blindly with something else. You are looking at the data, right? You're looking at the data, you look at the recommendations, you talk to the people, and ultimately the leader is expected to take a call saying based on these risks and these I'm willing to weigh this slightly lower and therefore I will go with the recommendation of the AI engine. Or if it is something where it is only a price plan, I know I have not much to lose. I would simply run an A/B test and say, okay, let me allow the AI to prove me wrong before I go back to someone else. So I don't think there is one standard answer. You will, in some cases, try an experiment based on what AI is telling you. In some cases, I would not do that. So for example, if I take the call center, I would probably say for these category of calls, I am going to start by applying AI. I don't need to blindly replace every contact center agent. Right? If someone is calling me for a plan change, someone is calling me for activating roaming, I know it's a standard protocol. So I will experiment with AI.
So another question also. So if AI is implemented, so critical thinking of the human reduces, right? So we started to depend more on the AI in every aspect. So how humans will react to that also in future if the AI's dependency comes more?
I think there are the question is whether do I have a choice to embrace AI or not. Honestly, the answer is no. If you think the machine is intelligent, I don't need to do much, then you will be furniture. Right? The machines will take over and you have no role to play. We will be forced to accept that there is a certain standard of AI which is going to take over, and I have to add value over and above that. There will be a few who will struggle, but I think as your generation and other future generations come, they will be taught to say that AI is going to be there. I mean, can you imagine, I ask your generation, what would be the world without a mobile phone? You can't imagine that. We were born when there were no mobile phones. Right? So increasingly, I think the world will be a place where people will be exposed to AI even as they start. Children are today having toys where the toys having a conversation with them. That is AI. And to them, that is accepted because that's what they've seen in their game.
Morning, sir. This is Vikasit. As I've explained about the disruptions, now AI is the talk of the century. And I would like to know what's your take on AGI. Is it really a hypothetical situation? If not so, how close or far are we in achieving the AGI?
AGI is advanced?
Artificial General Intelligence.
Okay. I don't think I'm an expert, so I will try and not answer much on that front, to be very honest. I need to ask AI if it can give you an answer. Look, today one of the biggest constraints when we talk about AI is the GPU consumption. Right? And if you see the ChatGPT enhancement which are happening, the transformation happened where it was able to work on text to images as well. So there is a transformation which is happening, and sooner or later, I think it will all happen, is what I would say. But again, I'm not truly an expert to talk about it.
One last question, last time.
Hello sir, I'm Parvati. So actually you said that AI is much more efficient and it might replace many job roles in future. So is it like job specific? Because for a person like me, I want to set my career in HR. So do you think AI can replace HR job roles? Like is it possible to take the people out of human resource?
Good question. I don't think so, because would I ever relate talking to a bot and feeling like a human? I don't think so, right? But will it make your job more efficient? Today there are companies which specialize in saying, here is how I can automate the onboarding of an employee, right? Can I automatically go and dip into the certificates of the student and validate or verify that? You would see automation happening at that level, or you would see AI being used, for example, extensively today in conducting interviews and tests. Right? How do I know that it is actually Shankar who's doing the interview and not someone else? So you would start using that for bringing in scale, bringing in velocity of how the business operates. But the human aspect of engaging, conversing, which we call as, let's say, business HR, for lack of another one, is still something that humans will have to do, in my view. Things like compensation planning, etc., there are tools, there are recommendations. But the final decision on what has to go out is still someone in HR has to take that along with business.
One more question, sir. It's a personal question. You said that stand a chance in this business world where there's AI is replacing everything, you need to be very skillful and everything. Have you ever felt threatened by this AI thing in your job?
Thankfully, not yet so far. Look, I think it's a good discomfort to have. Sometimes it's important to feel uncomfortable, and AI pushes you into those zones, and which is where I said you need to be constantly curious and figuring out ways to add value on top of where it is. Otherwise, you will be furniture, you will become ancient, right? So it is important to feel uncomfortable and important to work on how to get over that discomfort.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can we all give a quick round of applause?